This is the theme of Setback, an interview with a hitman, Bethesda's Revenge, select frames. So, um, the face that you get here with Viktor for an interview that likely lasted a couple hours, his face is still clear. His face is still focused. His face is um, one of real, it looks like sincere intent. But like the interviewer, he doesn't know he's about to die. The interviewer doesn't know he's about to die. Viktor doesn't know he's about to die. The only person who knows each of these characters is about to die is Bethesda. So the interview is finished. Looks like it is productive. The interviewer is smiling. Looks like he might have the type of interview that's going to bring back um, um, his reputation from being disgraced. And we don't know why he is disgraced. I mentioned this at the beginning of this film analysis, but we know enough to know that he seems to be satisfied with the interview. He seems to be willing to move forward. And so Viktor gets up and gives the man the ring, and the interviewer knows that ring. That is an identification in the same way that it was an identification on his brother's hand, and it was noticeable. It is an identification in his hand right now that it's going to, holding that ring is holding narrative history. Without even saying anything, Viktor didn't even have to say, "I got your brother's ring, I killed your brother." In the same way that the lighter that Sergei puts in an envelope for Viktor's mother and the lighter that Viktor puts on the table for trafficking, it's already understood that I got the lighter, I got the ring, your family member is dead, right? So he's looking at this ring, he's observing it, and then it's going to spook him. And so he understands that what that ring possibly means, which shows the fear in his face and in his eyes and in his mouth. And then Viktor and Bethesda come through the door or come into the apartment. And so he's holding a gun. Now, he's been holding a gun. He had a gun in the ankle, then he pulled out the gun while he was in a car. And so he's been holding his gun. Now, we don't know if the gun is loaded, because remember, he woke up in this place. But it's like Viktor and Bethesda have come to a party. You know, she's dressed for the occasion. She has the necklace on, she has on a fancy dress, and the scars in her back. And so he's asking about the ring, holding them sort of hostage, right? We see the scars on her back, and he's asking about the ring and where did she get the ring? And Viktor is basically going to, what he asks, did you kill my brother? And he did. And so Viktor takes his, it's interesting, Viktor takes his position behind Bethesda. He's walking behind her, and Bethesda is looking directly at him. So now she's conducting the meeting. The interviewer thought he was in charge, and then Viktor thought all this time that he was in charge. But Bethesda has been the real person, the real culprit who has been in charge. So now that Bethesda is actually in charge, and I forgot to mention in the previous frame that when Viktor walks behind her, he gives the gun that belonged to the interviewer to Bethesda. And so he walks behind her, and she goes and sits on the couch, and she begins to facilitate a discussion with the interviewer. And she tells her narrative history in the form of a parable, essentially. And what she talks about is, she talks about this cruel king who ruled his domain, and the farmer owed a debt to the king, but he didn't have anything to pay. He didn't have any money to pay the king. So the king decided to take his two precious daughters as payment. The farmer tried to get in the way, intervene, and try to refuse, but the king killed the farmer. And the two girls were instantly put to work, and that was essentially put to service for the sexual appetites of men. They were both 10, or they were around that age of 10 years old. She was 10, and I don't know what age her sister was. And she's talking about that the sisters were two different types of sisters. One was weak, one was strong. And the weak one, her sister, could not withstand the sexual appetites of men, but she was, and she labels herself as strong, as being able to learn the ways of men. And so she was able to endure, and she makes a note of saying why he's here, and that it was all an illusion to get him to trip up so that she could be the one to take it all away. And the interesting thing is, Viktor doesn't really detect or even really consider that the parable about her that she is facilitating and discussing relates also to him. That he wasn't a king, but he was a person who took away her family, because Viktor is the one who shoots. He's the one who shoots her mother and her father. And when she's talking to this interviewer, she's basically kind of labeling him as a king, but that's only because he represents the client. And so part of this larger mob system. So this parable, this narrative history, this is where we get her narrative history. It's told in the form of a parable, and then she reveals herself. So it's interesting how the mob enforcer, who started out as a child, isn't able to recognize the woman who was a child when he first met her. And he is standing between the product and the client. And he is the mob enforcer that is between them both. And it's interesting, this image of a mob enforcer who started out as a child in a big t-shirt, who is now wearing a suit with a collared shirt, and is in love with the woman whose family he killed, and supports a system that sort of praises the client, right? So she gets into the parable, she talks about it, she in some ways she's putting her hands behind her neck, but I think it's her way of holding on to her scars to kind of push her forward. Because when you are confronted with the person who hurt you as a child when you were 10, when she says, "I'm surprised you don't remember me. I'm surprised that you don't remember me, but I was only 10." That he was one of the people that she had to endure as a child, his sexual appetite. But I think when she puts her hand behind her neck, it's a way for her to kind of control her emotions so that she can get out what she needs to get out, hold on to her scars, or remember her scars, because she knows those scars are at the back of her, and just say what it is she needs to say before Viktor shoots him. So here are her scars, right? And he's looking at her, he's listening to her, and he's still very confused about the whole situation, because he's holding on to this ring. He knows his brother is dead, but he's holding on to this ring as if one thing doesn't have, that the person who is sitting before him, whose sexual appetite he sort of expressed or projected onto her, is confusing to him. It's almost like he has cognitive dissonance, that he did a deed so many years ago, but he has distance himself so far from it that it makes no sense that the person that he raped as a child is now sitting before him and explaining her narrative history. It's like, why do you want to tell me that now? Why didn't you tell me that when you were 10? But of course, she couldn't tell him that because she was the product, and she had to act like a product, and she had to learn the dictates of men, the ways of men, and take it. And so he doesn't seem to understand, because he thought he was there. He had a goal in mind to revive his career, revive his reputation, and he wanted to use this interview with the hitman as a way to do that, not understanding the illogical aspect of interviewing a hitman. It doesn't even make any sense to do that, because then he would have to bring himself out of the shadows. It's not like the person was formerly in prison as maybe a murderer, and then you decided that you wanted to interview him, right? If he's a hitman, he's going to be a hitman. It's not like the title of the movie is not Interview with a Former Hitman. And no hitman would really come to light, would never really come to the forefront and reveal to people that he was a hitman. So he was so blinded by his desire to revive his career and bring himself out of this, this disgraced social position, economic position, that he just missed completely the obvious, right? But he's holding his ring as if one thing doesn't have anything to do with the other. He doesn't really understand her purpose and why she's here and what it relates to, and how she was the woman as a 10-year-old that he raped. So he looks back at Viktor, because that's what male energy does. It's trying to understand, why do you have me here doing this? Why am I entertaining this woman? He's not saying as much, but it's like I don't understand what's going on, because he's still stuck in the interview. He's still stuck in his original purpose for why he decided to do an interview, and he can't make sense of the fact that that the narrative is shifting on him, and that whatever narrative he put in his head to justify many of the decisions that he made, it no longer suits him, and actually his narrative history is now confronting her narrative history. Their worlds are colliding. They met each other when she was 10 years old and however old he was, and now their narrative histories are colliding, and it's like it doesn't make any sense, right, for him. And so Viktor is preparing to do what he does, which is he's going to assassinate him. She is finishing her story. And right now he is pleading for some kind of mercy, because again, when you get to a certain age and you start to feel your mortality, whatever you've done in your 20s and 30s, you just don't feel like it should matter now that you're in your 50s and your 60s. But those decisions, they come to haunt you. They catch up with you. She was 10. So many years later, if let's say she's 18, 19, 20. Well, it took 10 years later for it to catch up. 10 years on his time, 10 years on her time, right? And so those decisions, whether you like it or not, whether you try to distance yourself from them or not, they're still going to come back and haunt you, in the same way that the consequence of Viktor killing her family members is now going to haunt him as well. And so he gets ready to pull out his gun. And just before that, she says again that it was all an illusion to get you to trip up, so that you can see it was me who took it all away. And then Viktor shoots him. She looks at him on the ground. I think she is moved by it. I don't think there's real happiness for it. I think it's just the completion of the setup, the completion of one part of the setup, and it's that part that is done, right? And remember, she's still holding the gun that Viktor gave her from the interviewer, and maybe he just didn't think about it or whatever, and you wonder why didn't she shoot the man who helped who hurt her all those years ago, but she got Viktor to do it. Viktor is actually unsettled about it. For the first time, we see a person who has just shot someone else actually be bothered by it, except for when he was with Sergei, but that's a different type of Sergei wasn't an assassination target. Sergei was a betrayer that he had to eliminate, that he was forced to eliminate. The interviewer was considered an assassination target, and not so much for Viktor, but mainly for Bethesda. But because he loves Bethesda, the interviewer became an assassination target for Viktor. So he goes and sits back down on the couch. He didn't really know what she was up to, of course, because after all, it just seems like, the task is done. He thought it was all about that task to kill the interviewer, set him up and kill him. But when she raises the gun, he's actually shocked. And she came dressed well for it, hair and all, with the necklace, like she was going to a fancy event. So she holds the gun, holds him at gunpoint, and then she goes into her speech with him. So she shoots him, and she's very careful in how she says her words. She doesn't yell. She doesn't talk fast. She just says what she needs to say, and basically tells him first, don't die yet, right? So then she asks, why go to all these lengths? And then to make you fall in love with me, to have a life together, the pain. And then she reveals she's the one who sold him to trafficking. So that kitchen fight scene that we see that was a setup, right? And then she talks about how it's a boy, your boy, the boy you've always dreamed of. When he grows up, he will despise you. And she makes a statement that Sergei made, that sometimes a simple bullet is not enough. So the very thing that Sergei told Viktor about the guy that they were holding hostage and bringing that woman in who had the hood on her head is the same thing that she's saying. Because remember, she learned the ways of men. So he's looking at his wound. That wound says a lot. How many wounds has he given to other people, and now he is actually wounded? But the wound is more than the bullet in the chest. The wound is in his heart as well. The wound is in his mind. The wound is in his own confusion. And in the same way that the interviewer is confused about the whole setup, Viktor is just as confused too. He's just as confused. And so she goes through her speech where she's talking about it and how she went through all these lengths. And she basically says that I didn't want you to miss out. And so this is where the flashback comes, where Alexei is receiving a package in the mail with a video, a CD or DVD, and he watches it. This is Alexei here, who works for Interpol, who Viktor let go. And he's watching the scene that Viktor was in. And so she lying on the ground is part of the whole ploy. That she wasn't as hurt as she made herself out to be. Remember when I said that little cut on her lip just seemed odd? Just one cut. All these men who are trying to attack her, and she only has that one cut. She don't even have handprints on her neck. And so this is Alexei watching Viktor fight the very man who had his hand around Bethesda's mouth. This is how he knew, and this is how he justifies selling Viktor out to get out of the game, the mob. And so then trafficking receives that very video, right? Because Alexei is still part of the mob. And there you see Caesar, and trafficking is going to send Caesar to kill Viktor. But we already know that Viktor kills Caesar. And then she finishes her speech. She basically finishes what she wanted him to know about the fact that she has a boy, and that the fact that she sold him out, and that to bring a man to his knees, a simple bullet is not enough. And so there's a flashback. Viktor is not having a flashback, but when she makes the statement that it's a boy, your boy, the boy you've always dreamed of, when he grows up, he will despise you, right? That it is the writer director who is inserting this as a pseudo flashback, right? That Viktor always had some kind of longing for something else. That as a boy, he gets up off the bed, he looks out the window, and he hopes. Now, he goes about it by becoming a mob enforcer and making a life-changing decision that is now going to catch up to him, meaning that he's going to be killed. But it is this boy here, the boyness of him, that she's going to raise, and that she's going to show him the video of the interview, and that and she's going to encourage him to despise Viktor. Viktor's going to be dead. However, to me, that is not as effective as a strategy. It would have been better to leave Viktor alive and keep the child away from him, and that be actually a way to sort of bring him to his knees, to the point that he can't have a relationship with his child. But I do understand what she is doing here in terms of channeling the boy in him that wanted better, and connecting that to the boy in her belly that is going to grow up without his father. And so we have this juxtaposition of when he makes that decision, that initial decision to become a mob enforcer, to when he's holding her at gunpoint as a child. And this is her face that we see, same kind of hair coloring. That same girl that he was holding hostage is the same, holding at gunpoint and about to pull the trigger and was stopped by Sergei, is the same girl who is standing before him now. So he finally gives in to his wound. He dies. And he is basically, he just dies. And so that very boy in him looks out the window hoping for better. The one who became something before his time, because if being a mob enforcer was the thing he was supposed to do, then he wouldn't have had to frame himself as an outsider. But sometimes you make decisions because you feel like you have to make certain types of decisions. All right, like, subscribe, and visit. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for more discussions. You can visit my YouTube channel for further film analysis. It's Favorites Film Analysis as the title of the channel. You can always send me an email and ask me a question, reginawhyfavorites@yahoo.com. My Overcoming Setback, 5 Keys for Entering and Exiting Correction book will become available around October 2021. I'm still doing some editing. The book does not focus on film analyses, but I use the content that I created for the book to support my my perceptions of setback used as a theme in select films. So when the book becomes available, I will send out a notification video, audio. Thank you very much for visiting the channel.